We've said it before and we'll say it again. The Nissan Kicks e-Power is perhaps one of the most significant debuts in the past couple of years. Just think about it. It's a proper and a full hybrid vehicle that runs more on electric rather than the engine, and it's wrapped in this rather practical crossover body. Plus, you don't have to take out 3 mortgages to be able to afford this kind of vehicle. It is a true hybrid for less than 1.3 million pesos. Is the entry-level EL variant a little bit too bare? To find out, well, we're here at the Bridgetowne Destination Estate to take it out for a spin. And right behind me is the Bridgetowne Obstacle Park, the sort of place where you'll probably find one of these active lifestyle vehicles just parked around the corner. So right now we're entering Bridgetowne through the E. Amang Rodriguez access point in Pasig City. And as we're driving along Bridgetowne Boulevard, this 6-lane, 1-kilometer stretch of road, it should tell us a few things about the car. Well, so far I can tell you that the ride, as far as the Kicks is concerned, is a hint on the firm side. Now, I'm not talking about like 90s pickup truck levels here. Like, nothing rides like that anymore. Well, maybe a few kinds of vehicles, but not everything rides like that anymore. You do feel a bit of the road surface. You're definitely going to feel it through a bit of suspension movement, but it's not totally uncomfortable. In fact, these seats are plenty helpful when it comes to drowning out any road imperfections, because these are Nissan's zero-gravity seats. So they do a fair job of absorbing any road imperfections. So despite having that firm suspension, you're still not going to get backache. As for handling, well, okay, it's a family crossover. It's not going to be sporty in any way, shape, or form, and don't expect it to be a GTR at all. But I do have to say this. Most people will probably appreciate the light steering, and that makes it more maneuverable in tight situations, such as making U-turns or parking in a tight spot. Well, so I mentioned how it rides and how it drives, but it's also worth mentioning how this certain technology works in the Kicks e-Power. Now, Nissan calls it the e-pedal. Really loving those E's, Nissan. As I go up this bridge, I'm using a little bit more of the throttle. It acts like your typical accelerator, but as I crest it, and if I let go of the pedal, instead of coasting like a usual car, it sort of engine brakes for me. It does flash the rear brake lights for me, but it slows down for you. And oh, check out that structure over there. And it actually has a name. It's called Victor, and it stands 20 stories high and was designed by a film artist. His name, Jeffrey. How does it feel on the road? Quite frankly, it feels like a regular car. Which is a good thing, because you don't want to change your driving style. You don't want to change much of how we've been driving for the past century, really. So, not much adjustment is needed. And that's what makes this concept work. And that's what makes this concept very, very good and effective. So for now, let's get out of Bridgetowne through the C5 Libis access point in QC. And remember, both access points are open from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. as of this time. Of course, you know that vehicles like this, and the Kicks in particular, does well when it comes to economy, because if you've seen our previous big test, and thank you for watching it, if you've seen it, you already know that this can easily do over 20 kilometers per liter. But most people, they get stuck in traffic a lot, and a couple of days ago, I spent over an hour stuck in floodway. Like, it was probably like an hour and a half stuck in floodway. My average speed was like jogging pace the whole time. It took me 2.5 hours to cover 18 kilometers. And normally that would mean really terrible fuel economy. Doesn't matter what you have. But in the Kicks, it still managed 11 kilometers per liter. And Some of you guys may remember that we posted a photo on our socials a couple of days back showing that figure. And if you did see that, thank you for following our page. And here's another interesting thing about the Kicks. So it's practically a self-charging system, right? And you don't have to look for a wall socket or a whatever to top up the batteries. It does it by itself. But if you want to charge it like right now while you're driving, you flick this EV switch and hold it all the way down and it goes to charge mode. Now charge mode of course is going to use up the fuel in the engine, and that's going to affect your fuel consumption. But once you're able to top up those batteries, that means you can run on full EV mode. Now we really can't say how far it'll go on a single full charge, but all in all the range can easily be doubled, that includes fuel, to about 800 kilometers. And if you're really careful with the throttle, maybe you're probably looking at 900 kilometers on a single tank. So what is life like inside the Kicks EL? Well, truth be told, it feels similar or not exactly the same as the top-of-the-line VL model. The only difference was that had a leather steering wheel, but of course you already noticed something's missing here, and that's the touchscreen. Yes, the EL is probably one of the newest cars you can buy without a standard touchscreen in its segment. Truth be told though, I would much rather have something like this over a touchscreen that is laggy, unresponsive, and uncooperative. But yes, your entertainment options are going to be very limited. You also get this nice elbow pad on each door, and you even have a half digital instrument cluster. So half of it is for your vehicle information and the other half for it is for your speedometer. Now, other than the lack of the screen, of course, it is fairly equipped. Okay, so at least you get cruise control in this thing, automatic climate control, 3 USB ports, an auxiliary port, a pretty sizable cubby hole area. So if you're not too bothered about the lack of a screen and a reverse camera, you're gonna say, hey, this is totally fine and this is everything I need. As for space here at the front, well, it kind of looks deceiving because the car looks small from the outside, but it's actually not too bad in here at all. Thankfully, they also kept the tilt and telescopic steering wheel, as you can see, and they also kept the seat height adjuster, perfect for shorter folks. I do have to note though that this console right here is pretty bulky, so you might find yourself brushing it from time to time. So that's the front covered. What about the back? If you already saw our big test between this, the Honda HR-V, and the Toyota Corolla Cross from a few weeks back, then you probably know what the rear accommodations are like in the Kicks. But if you haven't, well, I'm gonna recap it for you because they're the same across the range anyways. So rear legroom isn't exactly the best. Now, this seat is set for someone who's about 5'9", 5'10". And yes, I do have a decent amount of room. But if you compare it to something like a Corolla Cross or an HR-V, well, those models have a little bit more stretch out room. And making things feel a little bit tighter here is this really long console right here. And it really just cuts into more legroom. And if you sit right in the middle here, you're gonna have to deal with this transmission hump down there. On the flip side though, at least you have good shoulder room here in the Kicks and you have good hip room. Not to mention, you have a decent amount of storage space. You have one bottle holder down here and you have a little pocket right behind each seat. And of course, the all-important USB ports. There are 2 of them at the back of the Kicks, so at least there's that. If there's one thing I would like to add in the Kicks, aside from a little bit more legroom, would be a rear armrest. Now, yes, this is the entry-level model, but even the higher spec versions don't have them, and most of its competitors do. Now, I do wish it does get somewhere along the line, and the middle seat really, it's not that comfortable, and it's really tight right here in the center. And it's not like the Kicks is going to be filled to the brim with 5 passengers all the time. So a rear armrest really would be a great addition here. And I'm going to make another reference to our previous big test. If you recall that the Nissan Kicks actually had more cargo room compared to the Honda HR-V, despite being smaller on the outside. And that's one of the interesting things about this model, because despite looking smaller, you wouldn't expect it to have a fairly competitively large trunk. And as you can see with all the junk in the trunk we have at the moment, it swallows it up quite well. As for design, how can you differentiate this EL model from the more expensive VE variant? Quite frankly, there is none. You put two of these together and there's practically no difference. The only way to tell really is if both cars don't have tint, and check if one of them has a touchscreen. If they have a touchscreen, then that's the VE. Other than that, they're exactly the same from the outside. But if you're going to compare this, let's say, with the top-of-the-line VL, the only main differences are a pair of fog lights at the front and a black roof, or a two-tone paint scheme. As for the entire look of the car, well, it follows Nissan's current design language with that V-motion grille at the front, maybe slim headlights, got that gloss black trim here to further accent the front end. And when you go to the side, you're gonna get sort of muscular details on the shoulder line here and on the wheel arches. And perhaps an ode to its name, they kicked up the rear window. All in all, well, perhaps the color just doesn't really pop out the design characteristics of the car, but one thing is for sure, it's a lot less divisive than the model it replaced, the Juke. So let's wrap things up with the pros and cons of the Nissan Kicks e-Power EL. Quite a powerful name, but okay. So starting with the pros, of course, you got that very innovative powertrain system. And of course, you have the performance that goes along with it. It's no Tesla, but you get that instant torque nonetheless. It's also got a pretty surprisingly sizable cargo area to go along with it. And thanks to that practical crossover body, it's also a pretty good family car option. Of course, let's not forget about the value of this car. Again, you're getting a full hybrid for less than 1.3 mil. And let's not forget the fuel economy figures of this thing. Pretty good even if you're stuck in practically standstill traffic. As for cons, well, while the cargo area is decent for its size segment and so is the headroom, the same can't be said about its legroom. It's gonna be pretty tight there if you have long legs. Thankfully, I don't. Another thing worth noting is noise isolation. We think it could be a little bit better in this model because it runs on electric for the most part and we're expecting a quieter driving experience. So wish they could do that if ever they do facelift this model. And last but not least, of course, would be the lack of a touchscreen. Now, it might not be a deal breaker for some, it might be a deal breaker for some, but that also means you don't get other in-car entertainment options such as Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. And you don't even get a reverse cam. You're gonna have to use your good old eyes to look out the back. If you do want those features, you're gonna have to shell out 100,000 pesos more for the VE variant. And on top of having the missing features here, you're also going to get some bits of the Nissan Intelligent Mobility Safety Suite. So that includes automatic emergency braking, you got your blind spot monitoring and whatnot. So if you think it's worth the extra investment, sure, go ahead and go for the VE. But as a whole and as a package, at 1,239,000 pesos, it's a pretty good deal if you're willing to overlook the lack of a modern in-car entertainment system. And when you consider the tech that this car packs, it's really good value for money. And because of that, and because of its significance, we're gonna have to rate this an 8.5 out of 10.